The room was a void. Absolute darkness pressed against Kang's eyes. Though he could not see, he felt every shadow creeping along the walls. Days and nights blurred together, each indistinguishable from the last. No clocks, no windows, just the rhythm of the house, the echo of footsteps, the clatter of metal dishes, the faint murmur of voices through the corridors. A life measured in sounds, in smells, in the subtle tremor of the air itself. Kang's hands rested on the arms of his chair, taut with barely restrained energy. Every nerve in his body was alive, every sense heightened beyond human measure. He had been stripped of sight, but not of perception. The world was louder, sharper, more precise. He could tell who was approaching the room from the way the floorboards creaked under their weight, the subtle hitch in a breath, the metallic click of a belt buckle or a ring. He had mapped the house in his mind, every step of every servant, every inflection in every guard's voice, every pause in June's arrogant laughter. June thought him powerless. Thought he had taken everything, Kang's sight, Kang's strength, even Kang's will. He was wrong. The first night, Kang heard her, Elena, weeping softly in the distance. Her voice was thin, trembling, carrying pain that she could not disguise. And after her cries, the unmistakable sound of June's laughter, cruel and triumphant. Kang's hand gripped the armrest until his knuckles whitened, blood prickling through his skin. He let out a single, low whisper, almost lost in the darkness. "You won't see me, June. But you will feel me." The days that followed, Kang became quieter, slower, more deliberate. His silence unnerved everyone. Guards who once moved with confidence now tiptoed, anxious, fearful. Every clink of armor, every shuffled step, every whispered conversation, Kang catalogued it all, storing it in a mind sharpened by suffering. He learned which men lied too easily, which drank too heavily, which trembled when they thought they were unseen. One evening, a particularly careless guard laughed too loudly, a slip in judgment. Kang did not flinch. He did not move. Yet later, that man was gone, replaced by a more cautious, watchful soldier, one loyal to him, who had felt the subtle command in Kang's unspoken voice. Night after night, Kang trained himself, not with his hands but with his mind. He counted every footstep, every breath, every shift in the air. He began anticipating movements, predicting conversations, sensing moods, intentions, even the hidden guilt behind June's confident tone. The darkness was no longer a prison. It had become his weapon. And slowly, with terrifying precision, he began to unravel June's world from the inside. Elena approached one evening, carrying a plate of food. Her steps were careful, tentative, almost hesitant. Kang smelled the tremor in her hands, the nervous flutter of her pulse, the faint metallic scent of fear mingled with determination. He did not move. He did not speak. Yet she froze in place, the invisible weight of his awareness pressing down on her. She realized, for the first time, that he could hear everything, that his blindness had sharpened his mind to something almost supernatural. The sound of her soft breathing, the quiet placement of the dish, the faint rustle of her clothes, all of it entered Kang's consciousness like a symphony of subtle signals. He listened to her, analyzed her, memorized her, even as she held her gaze down, unwilling to meet his unseen eyes. And then, faintly, he heard it, a whisper, a half-murmur of guilt from June, echoing through the halls. Kang smiled, a small, cruel curl of lips. The silence of the room no longer suffocated him. It invigorated him. Each sound was a thread he could pull, each whisper a lever to manipulate the world outside his cell. He could feel the shift already. Guards and servants had begun to tread lightly, to speak softly, to second-guess their own thoughts. June, too, had begun to show cracks, a flicker of doubt in his arrogance, a tremor in his confidence, a subtle hesitation when he believed no one was watching. Kang leaned back in the chair, letting the darkness cradle him like a lover. Pain, rage, and betrayal had refined him, sharpened him, made him more than he had been before. He could no longer see the world, but he knew it. Every secret, every fear, every weakness, it was laid bare before him, like a map he could navigate with ease. And in the silence of that blackened room, a thought crystallized in his mind. This is only the beginning. The darkness embraced him. It empowered him. It was no longer a prison, it was a throne. And when June finally realized the extent of what he had done, the man who had been blind, broken, and caged would rise not with violence, but with inevitability. Every whispered word, every hallucination, every shadow moving just slightly too fast. It would be Kang's hand guiding the destruction of the man who thought himself untouchable. The screen of his mind glowed faintly in that endless black. Kang inhaled slowly, deeply, savoring the anticipation of the torment yet to come. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a small, cold smile, a predator waiting, patient, unstoppable. You will feel me, June. You will feel me. The mansion was no longer a home. It had become a labyrinth of fear, a place where shadows moved with intent, and every creak of the floorboards carried the weight of judgment. June walked through it like a man balancing on the edge of a cliff, never daring to let his guard down. It started subtly. First, faint knocks from Kang's locked room, rhythmic, almost melodic, but persistent. He thought it was the wind. Then, at night, a soft whisper, barely audible over the hum of the mansion's electricity. Did you sleep well, brother? June froze mid-step, staring into the black hallway. The words seemed to come from everywhere at once, the vents, the walls, the shadows themselves. He called out, but there was no reply. He sent guards to check. 2 came back shaken, speaking of nothing but the uncanny stillness of Kang's room, the way the chair looked impossibly still, and yet alive. Kang sat there, of course, perfectly still. In the darkness, his body a silhouette of patience and calm. When the guards asked if he was all right, he smiled faintly and said, I was just talking to my brother. The words were harmless, casual even. Yet the effect was instantaneous. Fear rooted itself in the hearts of men who had once feared nothing. June began to notice it himself. At night, while Elena slept, he heard whispers, sometimes a syllable, sometimes a full sentence, coming from the vents. Sometimes Kang's voice was calm, almost gentle. You sound tired. Just like the night I went blind. June's skin prickled. The mansion, once a place of control, now mocked him. He stormed into Kang's room, slamming the door open, breathing heavy, heart pounding, only to find Kang perfectly still, silent, smiling faintly in the darkness. Can't you see him fine? Kang's words were soft, cruel, deliberate. June staggered back, unsettled. His hands shook. He realized, with a gnawing horror, that he was afraid of a man who could not see. Afraid of someone who had not moved, not once, yet whose presence was everywhere. That night, June drank heavily. The clink of bottles echoed through the halls, yet even that did not drown out the whispering. Kang hummed softly in the darkness, a faint melody, a reminder that he was listening, always listening. Even Elena noticed the shift. She caught June flinching at shadows, flinching at his own footsteps, muttering to himself. Her eyes widened with both fear and a strange, grim satisfaction. She had seen the spark of the storm coming, but she had never imagined the extent. Kang's method was simple. He never moved. He never attacked. He never revealed his hand. And yet, every creak, every whisper, every subtle shift in the mansion became a weapon. June's confidence, arrogance, and control, all stripped away silently, invisibly, relentlessly. The house was alive with tension. No one laughed. Guards whispered Kang's name when they thought no one could hear. June, trembling, isolated, and paranoid, sat in his room staring at the shadows, realizing he could never truly know where Kang was, or when the next whisper would come. And in the darkened room across the hall, Kang sat quietly, smiling faintly to himself. The walls are mine, he whispered. The shadows are mine. And soon, your mind will be mine, too. June could no longer tell if he was awake or dreaming. Every shadow in the mansion seemed to move with purpose, every creak of the floorboards whispered a warning. The once familiar hallways now twisted and shifted in his mind, even though the walls themselves remained the same. He began to see things, flashes of movement where there was nothing, silhouettes where no one stood. It started subtly, a whisper that seemed too close, a faint knock when no one approached. He told himself it was the wind, the old house settling, the nerves fraying under pressure. But deep down, he knew better. Something unseen was watching. Something blind, but all-seeing. Elena noticed the change first. June's arrogance had crumbled into jittery paranoia. He started questioning guards, checking rooms twice, flinching at the slightest sound. She watched silently, holding her baby, feeling a mixture of sorrow and vindication. She had warned him in her own way, but he had ignored every subtle signal, and now the house was collapsing him from within. Kang's influence spread like smoke through the walls. Whispers became full sentences, softly echoing in the corridors, as if the mansion itself had gained consciousness. "You look pale, brother. Tired. Like the night I went blind. Counting steps again, aren't you?" Each phrase, spoken in a voice that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, planted doubt in June's mind. He tried to rationalize it. He tried to convince himself it was just nerves. But the evidence mounted. Guards spoke in hushed tones of sounds that could not exist. Doors were found open that had been locked. Objects shifted. Shadows lingered too long. One night, June's bravado shattered completely. Kang's door was found open. Panic surged in June's chest like ice water. He rushed down the hall, adrenaline fueling every step, ready to confront the man he thought powerless. And there Kang was, sitting perfectly still in the darkness. Not a flicker, not a movement, not a single sign that he had changed position. Yet the weight of his presence was undeniable. June's hands shook. His confidence evaporated. The realization hit him like a blade. He was afraid of a man who could not see. "What's wrong, brother?" Kang's voice was soft, deliberate, almost soothing. "You look pale." June froze. He wanted to strike, to scream, to demand answers, but all he could do was stumble back, chest heaving, mind fraying at the edges. For the first time, he felt the full scope of his brother's power. Kang didn't need his eyes to control the world. All he needed was perception, patience, and an unrelenting will. That night, the mansion itself seemed to whisper. Shadows stretched unnaturally. Floors groaned with imagined weight. June's every instinct screamed danger, even when no one was there. Kang's humming drifted through the walls, a haunting lullaby that promised both death and inevitability. And in his darkened room, Kang allowed himself a small, cruel smile. He didn't need to move, didn't need to act. He had already begun dismantling June's mind, step by step, whisper by whisper, until the man who had stolen everything from him, his sight, his peace, and his love, would crumble completely. "The cracks are showing," Kang murmured. "And soon, your mind will break entirely." Trusted men began to disappear. Loyal bodyguards, men who had once followed June without question, vanished in the night. When found, their deaths were staged to look like accidents: slips down staircases, falls in the garden, car crashes with no witnesses. No one suspected Kang, yet he knew. He heard every detail through whispers carried on the wind, through loyal servants who had pledged their quiet allegiance to him. June's paranoia began to spiral. His mind, already fraying, started to turn inward. Every knock, every shift in the floorboards, every creak in the mansion seemed to be a warning. Someone was always watching. Someone was always listening. And somewhere, in the darkness, a blind man smiled. The blind one is watching. He tried to trace the source of the chaos. He interrogated his men, checked the cameras, scanned the grounds. Every lead ended in whispers, every thread unraveled before he could hold it. And all the while, Kang sat in his locked room, unmoving, silent, patient. By now, June was visibly unraveling. Nights were sleepless, days were spent in constant tension. Elena, holding the baby close, moved quietly through the halls, avoiding his gaze. She had begun to sense the extent of Kang's control, how he could touch every corner of their lives without leaving his dark room. June confronted Kang one evening, his fists shaking, his voice raw with anger and fear. "What are you doing, Kang? What have you done?" Kang's response was calm, deliberate, chilling. "You took my sight, June. So I took your peace." The words landed like hammers. June's chest tightened, his blood ran cold. He wanted to strike, to scream, to destroy the man he once called brother, but every instinct told him to run, to hide, to brace for something he could not see. That night, the mansion itself seemed to shift. Shadows danced unnaturally, doors creaked open by themselves, and faint whispers floated through the halls. June could not sleep. He paced. He checked locks. He shouted at the walls. And all the while, Kang hummed softly from the darkness, a melody that promised inevitability. The guards spoke in hushed tones, exchanging nervous glances. They had begun to fear the blind man more than any gun, more than any threat. Kang's presence was everywhere, even when he was nowhere. And in the silence of his room, Kang allowed himself a faint, cruel smile. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. He didn't need to move, didn't need to act. He had already dismantled the foundation of June's mind, leaving only paranoia, fear, and isolation. Now, Kang whispered to the shadows, you will see the world as I do, and feel it crumble beneath your hands. June sat alone in his study, trembling, broken, and unsure of reality. The house had become his prison, the shadows his jailers, and the blind man in the locked room, patient, relentless, and untouchable, had turned every corner of his life into a battlefield he could not win. Elena had grown silent. Her days became a blur of routine, caring for the baby, preparing meals, moving through the mansion like a ghost. The weight of what had happened pressed down on her shoulders. Every glance at June reminded her of pain, every memory of Kang reminded her of fear, but also, in a strange way, of hope. June, on the other hand, had become a shadow of the man he once was. The mansion, once his kingdom, had turned against him. Shadows moved where there were none, whispers echoed from vents, and the flicker of every candle cast doubt in his mind. His paranoia had metastasized into rage. He lashed out, accusing Elena of loyalties she no longer held, blaming her for the power Kang wielded from the darkness. You live in my house, but your heart's still locked with him. June shouted one evening, his voice cracking, the baby stirring in its crib. Elena's eyes burned with quiet fury. Months of humiliation, fear, and grief had built inside her like a storm waiting to break. She stepped forward, hand trembling, and slapped him, the sound sharp and decisive in the oppressive silence of the room. He may be blind, she spat, voice low and dangerous, but at least he saw my pain. June staggered backward, the shock of the blow mirrored in his eyes. Rage flared, and he raised his hand to strike, but before he could, a faint sound carried through the walls. A soft hum, haunting and precise. Kang's voice. He had heard it all. Every insult, every accusation, every trembling whisper. And still, he had not moved. Still, he remained a phantom, a shadow in the mind, unseen yet omnipresent. That night, the mansion's silence deepened. One of June's most trusted bodyguards was found dead in the gardens, a precise, deliberate act that left no signs of struggle. Panic had fully gripped him. Every sound, every whisper, every creak of the house became a threat. You can't even see. June screamed into the darkness, his voice raw with desperation. How are you doing this? Kang's answer came not as a movement, but as a whisper, flowing through the vents, through the shadows, through the very walls of the house. Maybe you taught me how to feel the dark. June trembled. Elena held the baby close, watching him unravel with a mix of sorrow and vindication. She had survived the cruelty, the arrogance, and now watched the man who had forced her into this nightmare crumble under the weight of fear he could not escape. By the end of the night, June locked himself in his room, shaking uncontrollably, gun in hand, haunted by every sound. The mansion had become a cage, and Kang, blind, patient, silent, was the predator inside. Elena's whispered prayers and soft cries filled the empty halls, a mournful symphony against the ever-present tension. And in the darkness, Kang allowed himself a faint smile, knowing the final act was drawing near. Soon, he said, your mind, your empire, your pride. It will all belong to me. Piece by piece. June's empire was crumbling. His allies had vanished. His power had been stripped away silently, invisibly, piece by piece. Sleep had abandoned him. Shadows moved where there should have been none, whispers followed him through empty halls, and the weight of a blind man's vengeance pressed down on him with every step. He gripped the gun tightly, knuckles white, heart hammering in his chest. Tonight, he would end it. Tonight, he would confront Kang directly, end the man who had stolen everything, his pride, his control, and Elena. He stormed down the hallway, adrenaline surging, every nerve on fire. He flung open the door to Kang's room. Kang sat perfectly still, in total darkness, silent and calm. A faint, cold smile curled across his face. June raised the gun, shaking, his voice cracking. "This ends tonight, Kang." But before he could fire, a shadow moved behind him, silent, deliberate. One of Kang's most loyal servants, the one June had trusted implicitly, had been working in secret. Every whisper, every drugged meal, every restless night, orchestrated by this invisible hand. A sharp, clean slice. June's throat was cut from behind. He staggered, choking, eyes wide in disbelief. Blood poured freely. His gun dropped to the floor, sliding out of reach. He wheezed, the world tilting and spinning. Kang didn't move. He didn't need to. The servant, silent as a shadow, melted back into the darkness, leaving June gasping, broken, utterly defeated. The man who had once thought himself untouchable realized, too late, that the terror he had felt, the whispers, the hallucinations, the paranoia, had all been a carefully orchestrated symphony, conducted by Kang from the shadows. "You took everything from me, June," Kang whispered softly, his voice echoing through the room. "I just took it back, piece by piece." June collapsed to the floor, blood pouring, life slipping away. His eyes searched the dark room, searching for Kang, pleading, terrified, but all he saw was black. All he heard was the echo of the man he had underestimated, the blind devil who had controlled everything without leaving his chair. Elena entered then, holding the baby close. She froze at the doorway, seeing June on the floor, broken and defeated, and Kang sitting in perfect calm across the room. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, holding the child against her chest. Kang's gaze, though blind, was unyielding. The silence of the mansion pressed against them all. For the first time, Elena truly understood the depth of what she had helped orchestrate, even indirectly. "He freed me," Kang said quietly to no one in particular. "And now, it ends." The house was still. The shadows retreated. The whispers vanished. All that remained was the quiet, calculated victory of a man who had been broken, blinded, caged, yet had destroyed everything with nothing but his mind, patience, and the loyalty of those he commanded. And as Elena wept quietly in the doorway, holding the child, she realized the magnitude of the darkness she had witnessed. Kang, the blind enforcer of vengeance, had won, without stepping out of his room, without raising a hand. That is to tell you, the blind see everything. It is sad that 95% of my viewers aren't subscribed yet. If you made it to this part of the video, please do well to hit that subscribe button. It motivates me a lot. Thank you and God bless.